Welcome to the Cubbies Crib Podcast, powered by Fansided. My name is Jordan Campbell, and my co-host, as always, Jake Misener.
Here we are, another season upon us, a fresh pod to carry us through the year. It's going to be good.
So, in recent months, we've expanded our reach at Cubbies Crib. You know us from cubbiescrib.com. We're both the editors there. However, one of our projects in 2026 is to go into Instagram, open our YouTube page, really create a multimedia platform for our readers, take you guys beyond the headlines, and also talk about stuff that we didn't have space to talk to with our stories.
Yeah, I mean, at heart, we're both writers, but I think we're all too aware that not everybody wants to read, and that's fine. So, all these other platforms, like I said, it's going to give us a chance to talk to Cubs fans throughout the year, feel their feelings, work through all the ups and downs that come with 162, and hopefully some more after that. And yeah, it'll be good. You know, I think Cubs fandom has a great community, and this is just another way for us to be a bigger part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, there's no better time for us to be starting this podcast than the day after opening day, a famous day for overreactions. I've already heard one that suggested that Alex Bregman needs to be moved down in the lineup. So that's just the type of stuff that we're getting on this Friday with no Cubs game. But Jake, you are actually at Wrigley Field at the Federal Landmark for a 120 game. How were the vibes?
The vibes were great. I know way before I got into the neighborhood, you had people lining up outside the bars at 5 o'clock in the morning, starting their bar crawls. More power to them. But yeah, we got in. The energy is always good. There's just this excitement in the air, and I think part of it is coming off of last season. Making the playoffs and Cade Horton's emergence, and then now we've got PCA extension was definitely in the air. That was a buzz. I think it's just one of those like off season, off season, off season. We do so much, at Cubbies Crib covering all of that, but at a certain point, people just want baseball. So even though it was an eventful day weather-wise, I think there was just that buzz in the air that makes Wrigley Field and Wrigleyville really special.
That's what was cool about the day is before the game, you have all this stuff going on. You have Rizzo returning to the game. You have the excitement still in the air with the PCA contract. And then we're dealt with the reminder that it's a 162 game season. Matthew Boyd looked solid through the first three innings. The wheels kind of came off there in the fourth inning. We know what happened. But then immediately after the game, almost 30 minutes, maybe an hour after the game, Michael Cerami of Bleacher Nation reports that the Cubs and Nico Hoerner have got a contract extension done. You and I have been talking this week. Once they locked down Crow-Armstrong, they had to get Hoerner's contract done next. We'll get to PCA, but what were your initial thoughts when you saw the Hoerner news?
I mean, my initial reaction, one, shout out to Michael of Bleacher Nation for breaking that. That was awesome. Two, we were actually in the car driving back, and I looked over at my buddy, and I had told him on the way in, I was like, man, if only Nico had an extension, I could get a new Nico jersey today. So, you know what? The timing saved me $200.
Yeah.
That's probably not the worst thing in the world, but no, Nico just does so many things right, and his skill set is one that I think is going to age pretty well. I wrote about it back in January. It's like he's not his high contact rate isn't because he has crazy bat speed. Like he doesn't have good bat speed. He was in the bottom 8% of the league last year and still almost hit 300. So I think his hit tool is going to stay solid over the course of this deal. Even if he starts to decline defensively, he's still going to be an above average second baseman. So yeah, I love the deal. I think the length is right. The dollars are right. At least in terms of what we've heard out there, somewhere in the 120 range. Yeah, I just think it's a huge win. I think, it shows that the Cubs are serious. We've spent the last 5 years kind of railing on Tom Ricketts and Jed Hoyer for always playing it safe and thinking small and not being aggressive. And this winter, and then, with these two extensions, like it's kind of been flipped on its head in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I wrote our opening day preview piece yesterday morning. Well, it seemed like since the end of the 2025 season, Hoyer was really pushing back on a lot of the narratives that came out about him around the deadline. Because if we rewind back to last July, the Cubs were just passed up in the division by Milwaukee. Jed got his contract extension. It felt like we were heading towards a deadline where the Cubs were truly going to insert themselves, whether through the prospect capital with their financial flexibility, to get the player they want. We came away with Michael Soroka, and of course, we know how that ended. Very frustrated times for us at Cubbies Crib. But then it added another layer when we got to the postseason, and not only was it clear that Kyle Tucker wasn't the impact bat that the Cubs were hoping him to be in October, but they fell short of pitching. So we had clear results pointing to, hey, in July, we knew you needed an established starting pitcher. You didn't add one. This was the expected result. And it's not like we could say Hoyer was going to be on the hot seat because he just got his new contract. So I think along those lines, it's been a really refreshing past 3-4 months for the Cubs because it started with the Edward Cabrera trade. You saw Hoyer trade the organization's top prospect. For the first time in recent memory, he was willing to meet the asking price of the Marlins to do that. But even after the Cabrera trade, we felt, well, there's still another shoe to drop. This can't be their big move. Lo and behold, a couple of days later, Alex Beckman is here on a $175 million contract in the first. But even after those two things, you're thinking, all right, it's great. We have Cabrera, we have Bregman. We still got a lot of players, free agents at the end of next year. How are we going to keep this window alive? And this week, Hoyer defiantly answered that question. PCA got his extension. Hoerner got his extension. When you look at these moves, it's clear that the Cubs believe that though contention window isn't just 2026, it can expand beyond 2026 through 2029 when you have Dansby's contract expiring and you still have cost control all throughout your infield.
Yeah, I think this is what big market teams are supposed to do. You're supposed to develop great players and then do your best to keep them around. And I think that I still think, looking back to 2021 and Jed caught endless flack and, Cubs fans were ready to just roast him at the spit over no extensions for Baez and Rizzo and Bryant. And, obviously hindsight's 2020 and Jed, shockingly, guys, actually knows what he's doing. He's not just shooting from the hip. But regardless of that, like Cubs fans want that guy who's just around forever and like the face of the franchise, that when you think Cubs, you think X, whatever that player is. And, I think now, in a matter of days, we've got two of them. I think there's no question now. This is, a team that's going to be built around Nico. It's going to be built around PCA. And it's so refreshing. Like I don't ever want to hear, oh, there's no money. Like it's not profitable to own a baseball team. Like anybody who's been in Wrigley Field and seen what things cost there or around Wrigley Field, which, the Ricketts family owns more and more of with each passing year, Wrigley is printing cash all the time. Yeah. So it's really satisfying as a fan to see that money put back into contracts for guys like Nico and Pete.
Yeah, and I just can't emphasize how surprising, I guess I should say, that since the end of the 2025 playoffs, no team in baseball actually spent more than the Cubs since the World Series ended. It's, like you said, it's a dramatic change in how the Cubs have operated in recent years. Crane Kennedy did his radio tour yesterday. He pointed to the extra seats at Wrigley Field in October being among the reasons why they were able to have an aggressive winter. And sure, that's true, but this is just the way of doing good business in baseball, is locking up these players to early extensions. You have them on team-friendly deals. You control your books. And now moving forward, we know what the core is.
Yeah, and it makes sense from a business standpoint, right? Like more tickets, more revenue. You can charge more for postseason tickets. I get all that, but like, to flip it on its head, the way you make more postseason games and you play more games in October is you have good players. Like it all feeds into itself. And, I think there's still a ton of questions post 2026 on what this team's going to look like, especially in the rotation. You're going to have 2/3 of the outfield up for grabs potentially with Saya and Hap both hitting free agency. Um, on the outfield note, welcome to right field at Wrigley Field, Matt Shaw. It's 40-mile-an-hour winds and rain, and good luck. Go get it. But, like I said, still a lot of questions on what the team will look like past 2026, but a lot more long-term stability than we had heading into the winter. Because Cabrera, obviously, multiple years of team control. Then you bring Bregman in on a long-term deal. Now Pete and Nico, they joined Dansby and Bush. So like the infield's locked for the rest of the decade. That's a nice feeling. Then that allows Jed to take his resources, focus on addressing the outfield spots, bolstering the starting rotation, adding pieces in the pen. So all in all, huge week and really lays the foundation for the rest of the decade.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let's specifically talk about the 2026 season. I know we're a game in. The Cubs are already starting off 0-1. It doesn't help that the Brewers are playing the White Sox to open the season. So we already,
we're done.
Yeah. We already have ground to make up. That being said, Jake, earlier this week you ran some bold predictions, outlining 3 key storylines to keep an eye on throughout the year for the Cubs. Your first one, I thought, was a great one. You've been on this train throughout the whole offseason, but talk about what you have in mind for Daniel Palencia this season.
I think we're going to see Daniel Palencia make some Cubs history this year. I think if the team, is in that win range that they're expected to be, probably, low, similar to last year, 92, hopefully a few more, 94, 95. I think you're going to see Palencia top 40 saves. It's been a while since, a Cubs pitcher's done that. It's only happened a handful of times. And I really think, like you said, I've been harping on this all winter, but I think everybody at a national and international level saw what he can be in the WBC when he was locking down games for Venezuela. I love the stuff. I love his energy. I'm here to tell you, as somebody who was at Wrigley last year, the first time they did the light show with Gasolina, it was a vibe. And he is somebody who feeds off that energy. Just really exciting arm. I wasn't upset that the Cubs didn't go get a big name closer and overinvest there this winter, because I really do think that Palencia is going to be that guy.
Yeah, that's a key detail too, because when you look at the last time the Cubs were in a position to be a true World Series contender, Theo in July went out of his way to get Aroldis Chapman from the New York Yankees. We're not saying that we can get in July and the Cubs won't have a need for a closer or another high leverage relief pitcher. They very much might have that need. That being said, if we're in April, we're in May, we're in June, and Palencia answers the question of being that true lights out closer, that's a big item to cross off the shopping list ahead of the deadline. And now that leaves, whether it's Kevin Alcantara, whether it's Matt Shaw, that leaves those trade chips available for other areas on your roster. And for that reason, I think Palencia's development is a huge storyline of the Cubs season. If he's truly the closer that we saw him capable of being during the World Baseball Classic, that's a major answer for the Cubs moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, from a front office standpoint, it's a lot cheaper to build that bridge from rotation to the ninth than trying to fix either end of that bridge. So, and Jed's shown he's good at that. Like the Cubs have done an amazing job on reclamation projects and bounce back guys over the years. And I'm sure, there are going to be misses. We see that every year too, but the team has done a nice job that by June, July, they've weeded out what's not going to work. They've settled into their group and they're ready to go. So, I think Palencia at the back end is huge. And if he can be that guy, that, like you said, that's another item off the shopping list in July. At a time when you don't want to pay those prices.
Right. As we found out last July, that if the prices get high, the Cubs are probably going to steer away from them. I know everything we just said about Hoyer turning it up a notch this offseason. That said, I think some of his ideologies are going to remain. He's not going to pay an arm and leg for pitching at the deadline, especially if there's just an exorbitant asking price. That's not happening from the Cubs this season.
No. And I mean, you even saw that, the Cubs are more aggressive this winter, but the guy that they pushed the chips on and unloaded the top prospect for wasn't just a top caliber arm, but he comes with years of team control. So Jed still has his type. He wants long-term projectability. He wants, he's not a guy who's going to mortgage the farm for 1 year, barring extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
If it's like 2016 and there is one piece and that's all that's missing, then great. Yeah, you're going to push your chips in, try and win a championship. But as we've seen, those are few and far between. Usually you have a couple needs. You've got to spread your resources, both financially and prospect wise out to try and check all the boxes you can. And I guess the good news is it's not like this trade deadline could be any more disappointing than Michael Soroka.
Right. We could only go up from last July. Speaking of trades, let's talk about one of Jed Hoyer's best, in my opinion. When he traded two prospects, Zaire Hope and Jackson Ferris, to the Dodgers for Yency Almonte, sure, but and blocked infielder by the name of Michael Busch. At the time that the Cubs got him, we weren't sure, is he going to play third base? Is he going to play second base? Hey, what about first base? The Cubs settled on first base pretty early on in his tenure in Chicago. And since, he's been on a clear ascension towards being one of the best bats in all of baseball. He really was one of the best offensive first basemen in the National League last year. And when you're talking about how are the Cubs going to replace the impact back that Kyle Tucker was during the first half of last season, I think it starts with Michael Busch, right?
Oh, for sure. Like we're talking about PCA and we're talking about Bregman and we're talking about Hoerner, but like it's kind of just how Busch carries himself. He's fine being that behind the scenes guy who just puts his head down and work, but like that's all great. But because of that work, he's putting up huge numbers. Kind of picked up right where he left off yesterday. 3 for 4, 2 runs, a double, a walk. Like great. That's what I love to see. So I think he could be an all-star this year. I think it helps that Pete Alonso's not in the National League anymore. So,
big plus.
Big name out of the first base picture there in the senior circuit. I really like I said, quiet, understated, but he just delivers. And, I like him as a leadoff hitter. You could slot him down 3-4 if you needed more run production, but I love that he can ambush pitchers early in the game. Clearly, he knows his game and he sticks to it. And it doesn't seem like he has a lot of times where he like pushes outside of who he is as a player. He seems pretty confident in who he is and what he needs to do to be successful. And I just love that stability that he brings.
Yeah, everything you said about his offense is true. What I really love is just the leap that he's making defensively at first base. I know by the end of last year, we thought, well, there's a chance he could slide in as a Gold Glove candidate. I truly do think that we're getting close to him being one of the best fielding first basemen in the National League as well. And yeah, the offense is great. That's what the Cubs need, especially if they're not going to go to the lengths of paying someone like Kyle Tucker. That being said, it's still a team that thrives on run prevention. And as long as he checks that box for the Cubs at first base, that's also an underrated quality to his game.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. So I was watching the Wilson Glove Day video, and when they were talking to Dansby and Nico, both of them made sure to call out Busch.
Yeah.
So, like, those are two of the best defensive infielders in the game. So if they're shouting out what Busch does at first and what he brings to the table, like, we should probably take note of that.
Yeah, very much so. So then let's get into your last bold prediction. If things are going good with Michael Busch, if things are going good with Daniel Palencia, how soon do you think the Cubs might clinch the National League Central?
You know what? Even after yesterday, disappointing loss, I'm staying glass half full this year. This is going to be the year the Cubs lock up the Central by mid-September. We're going to have a couple, week and a half, 2 weeks of letting Craig rest key guys, get everything set up for October. I remember that in 2016 when they just dominated all year and just kind of cruised into the postseason, and it was so nice. It was the most enjoyable September baseball I've ever had. Haven't had that in a while. So it would just be nice to live up to the hype and the expectations. The Cubs pretty much universally were considered winners of the offseason, but, like we've heard from Jed and Craig and all the guys in the clubhouse, like none of that matters. Now it's about those guys going out there and doing it and executing. And I think the pieces are all there. This could be a really good team. This could be a team that dethrones the Dodgers, could make a deep October run. So again, yeah, a lot of things have to go right, but that's the case for any team that has postseason aspirations. So mid-September, NL Central. Let's book it.
And that's the thing when you look at where the Cubs are this year, and especially where Milwaukee is. There's a feeling of if not this season, then when? Especially with how aggressive the Cubs were in the offseason. But if you look at Milwaukee, they lost Freddie Peralta, though they don't have Jackson Chorio to start the season. Brandon Woodruff, who knows if he has an arm anymore? This feels like this year that the Cubs should get past Milwaukee, but not just sneak by them, just fly by them. But as I was writing that Chorio piece yesterday, you still have that Brewers voodoo in you. Like, hey, maybe it's Jake Bowers who's going to come up and just be a monster for them in the outfield. Maybe Christian Yelich runs back the clock and is just a monster in the outfield. So along those lines, that's why I do like the Cubs spending money because it's a one clear advantage they're always going to have over Milwaukee. They're always going to be able to outspend not just Milwaukee, but every team in the division. So it's nice to see them actually put that to use this offseason. And if it's not this season, I would hate to be where this podcast would be in October if Milwaukee's once again at the top of the division.
Well, and obviously, Cubs fans are going to know Cubs prospects, but if you're not paying attention to Milwaukee's farm system, you should. It's going to be a problem. They have built a pipeline. Like, hats off to the front office up there because they keep trading all-star caliber players, Cy Young contenders, like legit stars, and they are hitting on every single return. And their farm system is stacked. Like, they have a pipeline built to sustain them for the next 10 years. So, like, the Cubs need to strike while the iron's hot. They need to get it done this year because you're not going to want to let Milwaukee, further cement their place at the top because there are reinforcements coming and there is just a ton of talent down there.
Yeah, and that's even true if you look beyond just Milwaukee. St. Louis has a couple really intriguing prospects. Pittsburgh is, I know it's a joke to say, the Pirates, but Pittsburgh is looking like a sneaky team that could actually cause some trouble this year. So this has to be the year where the Cubs just push their chips to the middle of the table. Like you said, strike when the iron is hot. Everything that you did this offseason season put you in the position to not only be the favorite in the National League Central, but be maybe a notch below the Los Angeles Dodgers when it comes to the favorites in the National League. And you have to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's just, you hit it right on the head. Like, the one advantage the Cubs will always have in this division is money and market size, and you have to make it work for you.
Yep.
And it's been so long since they did. So, like I said, the move's been made, the pieces are laid out there, and now it's just about going out and playing. But if you want to talk about if there's a fan base panicking irrationally more than Cubs fans, it's probably Pittsburgh after Paul Skeens got torched. And I'm not making anything. It's one start. It's not going to decide his season, and I'm also not blaming, Boyd or Skeens being in the WBC. Like, just save all of it. I don't want to hear it. It just, these things happen. Boyd immediately knew what went wrong in his game plan. Like, we were sitting there watching him through 3, and I was like, God, he looks good. Like, he looked really sharp. And like, immediately he came out of the game. I have no doubt he talked to Tommy, and Tommy said, like, this is what we're seeing. They look at stuff. Like, Boyd went into his post-game presser knowing exactly what went wrong with his fastball. He's going to work on it in his side sessions between his next start and get back after it. Like, I don't want to hear that he's doomed because he pitched in the WBC. That's ridiculous.
No, and honestly, Tarek Skubal probably ended that conversation yesterday with the Tigers because he looked phenomenal. Tigers could have a really fun team, but that's a topic for another day. Let's move on to, if the Cubs are going to get past Milwaukee, it might start with their early season schedule. I know you can't really win a division in the first month of the regular season. You can definitely lose one. And you and I, we both play MLB The Show. We're both avid fans. You're learning the joys of franchise this year after no more March to October. And I messaged you because I started off 21-0 with the Cubs in my franchise. And I was like, wow, the Cubs early April schedule is very easy. I feel like if the Cubs are going to take advantage, this is the time.
Yeah, because once you get to mid-April, you start, you've got some really not ideal matchups there.
You got the heavy hitters coming up. You got the Phillies, you got the Mets, you got a couple series with the Dodgers. It's a gauntlet.
For sure. So like you don't want to head into that already a few games under 500. If anything, you want to flip it. You want to have a nice little cushion where you can head into that 9-12 game stretch, play 500 ball and feel good about it. But what you can't do is dig yourself a hole against teams like the Nationals to start the year. Again, I'm not making much. An opening day loss sucks. Nobody wants it. Obviously, all 30 fan bases want to win on opening day.
Right.
It's not possible. But you need to bounce back on Saturday, show up, put your best foot forward, and just start stacking wins here in the first few weeks.
Absolutely. So as we kind of round out our return episode, we have a couple of quick hitters that we wanted to get by to. Sure, we've talked on Pete Crow-Armstrong, we talked on Nico Hoerner, but as you look at this Cubs team, as you look at how the opening day roster was constructed, who's the one player that you're excited to watch this year?
Oh man, it's Cade Horton. Like,
yeah,
he's the most exciting pitching prospect the Cubs have had in a long time. His second half last year was Jake Arrieta level, 2015. I mean, he was brilliant, and it all winter I kept having the same conversation with fans. It was, what if Cade was healthy for that Milwaukee series, and instead of turning to Colin Ray and the bullpen gang for a must-win Game 5, you're throwing Cade Horton. I mean, it's a totally different scenario. It's hard not to, try and rehash it. But I think if he can, by midseason prove this staff belongs to him now, it makes you feel a little better about post 2026. Boyd could be gone, Tyon could be gone. You start losing those guys, and it's like, great, but we have a dude that we can pencil into that number one spot and build around him. So for me, it's Cade Horton.
Easily. And Cade's a tremendous pick. I love that pick. I'm going to go with a player that we might have forgotten about by the end of the 2025 season, but for me, it's Miguel Amaya. And I feel like the past few years, we've all been saying the same thing. If Amaya can stay healthy, he could be an answer for the Cubs as a long-term catcher. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, but the biggest shift we've seen in Amaya, really since the second half of the 2024 season, is his offense. He's become a major contributor when healthy. And we're at the point to the Cubs almost have to make a decision this year when it comes to Amaya. You have Carson Kelly, who's a free agent after this year. Amaya's still under team control, but ideally, you want to end this season knowing, do you have your long-term catcher in place? I don't think that's going to be Moises Ballesteros. I was impressed by what he did in spring training. He definitely took a step forward with his development, especially with the ABS stuff. But for me, it's Miguel Amaya. I want to see him stay healthy for one. That's obviously the biggest storyline. But I want to see him continue that offensive success. And then if he does, I think that's your long-term catcher.
Yeah, I mean that's a question, and like you said, we need the answer this year with Kelly gone. And I also think Cubs fans need to go into this season with some realistic expectations for Carson Kelly, because he was
very much so.
He was Barry Bonds, like that level of offensive production in April last year, an absolute monster. Which, like, great first impression, probably not a sustainable one. And we saw that throughout the year. Still a very solid receiver, got rave reviews from the staff. But if he's gone and, if Ballesteros isn't an option, and again, I don't think they're ready to totally close the door on it. I think in an ideal world, it clicks and he's a great receiver, the 300 hitter. But again, that's best case scenario. You need Amaya. You really do. Usually the free agent market for catchers is underwhelming at best. Because they're just, to me, there aren't very many catchers around the league who have the potential that Amaya does, and he's showing flashes. And as soon as he starts picking up steam, it seems like he gets hurt again and back at square one. Like, if he could just stay on the field and put it together for 162, I think he could be a really, really underrated piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, very much same. And along those similar lines, let's talk about where Amaya is probably going to start a majority of the season. Let's talk about the Cubs bench. We have Amaya. We have Matt Shaw on there when Seiya Suzuki is back. Right now, it's Dylan Carlson, Michael Conforto, and Scott Kingery. I think we can probably rule Kingery out. That's probably the move once Seiya's back. In recent years, you and I have definitely talked about this, that the biggest weakness Jed Hoyer has had has come with constructing that bench. It seems like he always pieces it together with former players who are inching closer to their retirement than productive years, or prospects that don't really do much because they don't have an extended runway. What are your thoughts on how the bench is looking at the start of the season?
I mean, they followed the same playbook again, but at least the guys aren't 39.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
ish. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think Jed has tried to kind of mirror how he builds bullpens and
Yeah.
tried to pull that approach to bench building, and it has not worked.
No.
Scott Kingery cannot be just can't.
No.
We said that when they signed him. Like this, he is a break glass in case of emergency option, which is where we're at with Seiya.
It happened, yeah.
I'm a little more optimistic on Conforto and Carlson. Again, I'm not asking for them to put up all-star caliber numbers. I just need them to be serviceable when Craig needs to get some guys off their feet. So I think Amaya is a key piece of that bench. I think we're going to see him at first. We'll see him behind the plate. Shaw, I think he might touch every position on the field at some point this year besides catcher.
He almost has to now. I mean,
now he has to.
Yeah, you talk about someone that immediately had the long-term role just upended. Sure, it happened once with Alex Bregman, but now it certainly happened after Nico Hoerner. A lot of people were thinking, all right, well, Hoerner leaves via free agency, Shaw slides into your second baseman. But now with the entire infield under contract through at least 2029, Shaw, you better embrace that role of a utility man.
Yeah, you better be ready to go diving into that brick wall when it's 40 degrees out of Wrigley. Yeah, I mean, two guys that are probably, I don't know, a little on their heels after the Nico news is Shaw, and honestly, Jefferson Rojas looks a lot more expendable now. Great timing. I mean, he really turned some heads this spring, so I think he's definitely a name to circle of guys that could be on the move at the deadline. But yeah, I think Shaw's versatility makes him a great bench piece.
Yeah.
And again, you never know. Like last year, Bregman had that quad injury that cost him, a quarter of the season. So like those things are going to happen. I think the playing time is going to come pretty naturally through rotation or injuries. But long-term wise, I don't know that I'd want to be Matt Shaw right now.
Yeah, that's true. And I think a lot of people look at the Cubs bench, and it's also important to know that Craig Counsell rides a lot with his starting players. If they're healthy, they're going to be in the starting lineup. It's just a matter of fact. We've seen it before with Dansby Swanson. We've seen it growing with Nico just following Dansby's blueprint. And we saw it with Kyle Tucker last year too, that even if you're battling an injury that's not severe enough to go on the IL, you're going to probably get into the starting lineup. So I feel like when it comes to the Cubs bench, they need players that can just make the most out of the small sample sizes that they're going to get. They tried doing that with Justin Turner last year. It didn't really work. I'm not sure how it's going to work with Dylan Carlson if he feels like someone that needs to have just extended at-bats if he's going to make a difference. Michael Conforto, who knows? The Cubs have always been in love with Conforto, dating back to when they drafted Kyle Schwarber. And yeah, his 2025 with the Dodgers was really bad. That being said, there's some underlying metrics that suggest he also might have had some bad luck. So if Conforto, Carlson, or even Shaw, the Cubs just need one guy from that group to just come in and truly be that impact bat off the bench. If that happens, I'm not saying the other spots on the bench don't matter. I'm just saying it's not as much of a headache as it used to be for us.
Yeah, for sure. You need a guy, you need to know that when you can, turn to the bench, there's a guy that you can put in that position where you've got to put bat to ball, move a runner over, drive in a run, whatever it is. But just circle back real quick on another point you made of the Cubs' tendency to just let guys play through small things. Like, frankly, I would like some guys on the bench to step up and show they're capable of in their regular.
Absolutely.
Because then hopefully after God only knows how many years of watching this, where you can look at a guy and he's not 100% and he's 110 for 3 weeks. And then 2 months later, we hear about, oh yeah, he had a weird hip thing. And I'm like, great, just shelve him. Like he's clearly not ready.
Right.
Get him off his feet, get him at 100%. That's why I loved how they handled Seiya's injury. Like, push him back. It's the same thing with Justin Steele. Do I want to see Justin on the 60-day? No, but recovery wise, all green lights, everything's looking good. Don't rush it. Just get him right, get him back on the field. I don't want to see guys, poorly playing through injury, because we've seen that story time and time again. And I think if the bench gives you some alternate options there where you feel like you're not sacrificing too much, then hopefully we can see, a more proactive approach from the Cubs this year on that front.
Yeah, and as you were saying, I think that's truly the one spot where if Matt Shaw is going to carve out a role for him, I think it's going to be because of that. He has enough offensive production that Craig realizes that he has to get him into a starting lineup on a semi-regular basis. But along those lines, maybe Dansby, maybe Nico, maybe even Alex Beckman realized, okay, I can take this day off against the Colorado Rockies and have Shaw go in. So hopefully that's where the Cubs bench is headed. Time will tell, but for now, that would do it for a return episode of Cubbies Crib. Thank you for listening to us. Moving forward, you can catch us on Monday nights and Thursday nights. We will be posting the times accordingly. We both have younger kids, so the times might be a little fluid, but expect around 8:15 p.m. You could also watch the video replay of our podcast on our Facebook page and YouTube, and the podcast is also available on Apple and Spotify. Thanks for listening.